Good morning. How's everybody? Probably about as tired as I am, right? My name is Mark Nagar. I'll be quasi-leading the panel, but I'm going to let everyone else introduce themselves. I lead the HHS Buyers Club at the Department of Health and Human Services. I'll explain what that is shortly, but to my left.
I'm Clint Druk. I'm the Director of the Division of Acquisitions in the Program Support Center at Health and Human Services.
I'm Missy Lieben. I'm the core and the PM on the project.
I'm Andrei Michalchuk, Technical Project Manager of this whole thing.
Hi, I'm Josh Phipps. I'm the CIO and the healthcare lead for our company, and I'm helping out with the taxonomy as well.
So we've been asked to go through a use case that happened over the past year. It's still ongoing, not complete. The use case always evolves, but we're going to give you the A to maybe M at this point of it, not quite to Z. We're going to allow plenty of time for questions, so please hold those and don't be shy about asking any. So we're going to walk through the introduction we just gave. I'll explain a little bit about the Buyers Club. We'll talk about the acquisition a little bit. We'll turn it over and we'll walk through the product, the agile development, some collaboration, really give you a sense of how this is really agile from a team perspective, which is why you're all here today. So the Buyers Club. As most of you know, IT acquisitions or IT procurement, some of you may like to call it reform, for instance, is a hot topic these days across the federal government nationwide. There has been one giant sort of failure that was known, but it really is a drop in the bucket when you look at the entire federal government. $50 billion is spent annually, and the failure rate, arguably, depending on who you ask, is somewhere between 70 and 90+%. Why is that high? Well, if you've ever been involved in an IT services project, you know that sometimes you're over budget, sometimes it takes too much time, sometimes you don't get what you want, and many of the times end users just aren't involved. If you think of all of the software that you use and you wonder, why was this put here, this doesn't help me, why are there 100 features that I never use, that really is a good example of how a lot of these fail, because these systems should be built very iteratively, using an agile cycle, and always be incorporated with end users, testing, giving feedback consistently, so at the end you have a system that works for everyone who touches it. So we stood at the Buyers Club to address some of these, to improve the acquisition, to make it more effective and efficient, and this is going to be one use case out of many in the future I'm sure you'll hear about. So the Buyers Club has three primary goals. We are to test new methods and models. We're to create some new processes. We're also to engage with stakeholders, internal and external, and to provide feedback like we're doing today, to educate as many folks as we can about what we're doing. Along the way, we're going to fail because it's inevitable. We're also going to learn from failure and share with others, which is why at this point, you'll be able to get it at some point after the session, there is a 2-page use case about this acquisition, and we touch base maybe to improve it and to elaborate on it maybe quarterly or so, because we want to follow this acquisition all the way from the inception of the problem to the closeout of the actual acquisition, so you get the full breadth of what has happened, good and bad. Shifting now to the purpose of the acquisition, I'm actually going to, before I get there, I'm going to say one thing. So the panel here you have on the far left, you have the contractor that won the award, Akira Technologies. In the middle here you have Missy Lieben, who's a project manager, and you have Clint Druk, who is the contracting officer from the procurement side that helped shepherd this through. I was more of a strategic liaison or consultant to work with the different groups up until award. To give you an idea of how this sort of came to be, I came about a year ago. I was aligned with Clint and some folks within his office to see if we could find some acquisitions, both at the Office of the Secretary level but also HHS-wide, that might be ripe for a newer, innovative approach. We looked high and low, At the end of the day, an odd thing happened that I was not expecting. I was developing a relationship with Clint, developing rapport, learning about what was there, what was not there, and it was this specific acquisition or requisition that crossed Clint's desk. And he gave me a call and said, this might be a good example. This might be a good requisition or acquisition we could use something new with. So collaboratively, we reached out. It was myself and Clint, some others, and Missy Lieben, and we talked about it. This went through several months of iterating on the statement of work to make it more of a statement of objectives, talking about the needs, how can we collaborate effectively. So that's really how this kind of began. But now, that little piece at a high level, I'm going to ask Missy to sort of do a quick deep dive into the purpose of the acquisition, as you can see here, but I'm going to let her provide her words to it.
Just to sort of echo what Mark is saying, from the very beginning, I felt as though I was supported by Clint and Mark through this whole process. From a needs perspective, we needed to implement a platform and an infrastructure. We had rather old infrastructure and old applications. So as we were moving forward, we wanted to implement new infrastructure. We wanted to modernize some database applications. And we also wanted to implement a web content management system and redesign our public-facing website and our intranet.
That's great. So how do we choose the acquisition that we did? What innovative method did we decide? After going back and forth and talking with Clint and looking at what the needs were and what was available, both that came out of the White House through the innovative contracting case studies, the digital services playbook, and the Tech FAR handbook, which is a supplement, not a supplement to the FAR, but sort of an additional guide to help you navigate some of the less known areas within the FAR. Neither I nor Clint nor Missy had ever done something called a two-stage down select. Somehow we found it, I forget how, but we vetted it. Clint can address a little bit of this too, but without having done some of these things before, which, these are out of the typical swim lanes in contracting, we vetted this type of solution by talking with the procurement staff, general counsel, industry. We wanted to make sure people would be receptive to a new approach. And by receptive, I mean, if we put a solicitation out on the street, would vendors reply? Would they take us seriously? Because this would deviate substantially from what we typically do. So we did it in 2 stages. Everything was known up front in the solicitation. In stage 1, we asked for a short concept paper. We set this aside totally for small business, the total small business set aside. Stage 1 was an 8-page concept paper, also a pricing proposal, and at that point we were going to down select to up to 5, and we're going to give each of those 5, if we went to up to 5, and give them each $10,000 via purchase order. At that point, we were going to ask them for a revised cost proposal if necessary, a 20-page performance work statement, and the last piece, the biggest piece, was going to be a functional prototype, basically via a homework assignment. And this way was helpful to us, and the innovative part here is that we so typically will ask contractors to provide us with text-based proposals. And in IT services, it's hard to really tell whether you're truly capable of providing what we need if we just ask you to put words on a paper. It's what I call the tell. And I'm more of a fan of the show and tell, which I'm sure we all loved in kindergarten. And so the show and tell aspect here, the show was the prototype, where we can look, touch, and feel, look at the coding, see mock-ups, and allow contractors to really do what they would like to do, which is to show their capabilities by designing something for us. And that's what happened here. Before I move on, Clint, anything you want to add in there?
Nothing in particular. I think that nicely summarizes it. I know I had some anxiety just given that I've supported ASPE for so long, and just making sure that they were on board throughout the entire process, and that we were taking an approach that they'd be happy with, rather than just sort of forcing something upon them, which sometimes occurs in acquisition offices.
And I'd just like to add the importance of the statement of objectives that really sort of gave me, from a project management perspective, an empowering place to allow the contractor to actually do what they do best and to solve the problems that we had. And also, with the prototype, it allowed me to have insight into how the contractor worked. It allowed me to see if they included web standards in the prototype so that they were thinking about it at the very beginning of the development cycle. And it also allowed me to see how quickly they could respond to requirements, and it sort of tested sort of the agile methodology that we were trying to adopt in this project.
I want to offer just a sort of a quick funny aside here. In going back and forth, which we did many times, by no means was this a simple, straightforward way of a new acquisition. We had several conversations over a period of months to determine if this was appropriate, how it was appropriate, what we're going to get out of it. We wanted to make sure that we would get an appropriate outcome, but there was no guarantee. And I remember distinctly, there's a lot of face-to-face contact here as opposed to over the phone or over email, which I think is it's very critical when you want to try something new with folks who don't usually do some of these things. And working with Clint and Missy was was gratifying, rewarding. I'm sure it was difficult at times for all of us to try something different. But there was one question that Missy asked me that has resonated, and I tend to bring it up whenever I speak, is what happens if we fail? And I said, well, if you look at what everyone is doing traditionally, failure is pretty rampant. But the biggest piece is that there's no guarantee for success in any acquisition. No request for proposal, no request for quotes, nothing you do that you put out on the street and get a contractor to come in and do work. There's no guarantee you're ever going to succeed. All you can do is mitigate risk. And we felt that this method, and many other methods are out there, were steps we could take to mitigate risk to increase the chance of success as much as possible. So that was sort of my response to her, and I try to use that as much as I can when I speak to other people because it makes sense. Anything you can do when you're putting in evaluation factors into solicitations, when you're defining your requirements appropriately, you do that to get what you need, but also to mitigate risk to the maximum extent practicable.
And I also just want to add to that I think that the risk mitigation argument to leadership really turned their decision around to supporting this acquisition, and this acquisition method. And so from my perspective, getting early buy-in from leadership was critical. Getting early buy-in from our budget team to put this type of acquisition through a rather rigid procurement system was critical. And I think everybody understood that if we could really reduce the risk and turn this type of procurement around, that they were all on board.
So I'm not going to read through a lot of this, but I do want to explain the value we thought of this acquisition, particularly in terms of the concept paper in dealing with small businesses or any business, is when you traditionally ask for a 30-page proposal up front, that's a huge time investment for both them, for the contracting office, for the program office, because they have to evaluate all these proposals. And if you have, we had 24 submissions. If we had 24 submissions of 30 pages, that was going to take a lot of time to review by everyone, a lot of time by the contractors to submit. So doing staged acquisitions can, in some cases, be a really benefit to all parties involved, to all stakeholders. And I like to use the term stakeholders a lot because although we're talking about Agile from a team perspective, some will think of Agile as development. But Agile can also be in terms of acquisitions. How can we make this procurement of this acquisition a little more flexible, a little more innovative? How can we streamline procedures but still stay within the FAR? Because by no means do we want to vacate what exists. By no means do we want to go outside of compliance, and we never did. So this gives you, some example of the value here. The biggest piece I think here is going to be the product and talking about the Agile development perspective, which I think a lot of folks don't completely understand because Agile is new to the federal government in many areas. So at this point, I'm going to shift to the product folks and to Missy and let them kind of guide. Welcome to come up, sit, whatever's that makes you more comfortable.
Sure. Hello, my name is Andre, and as I mentioned before, I'm the technical lead of this project. The project is about converting this. This is the current website of OSPI. You can go to ospihhs.gov and you can see this website. It's actually a great website. It has more than 2,500 different reports, really interesting reports. It has search engine. It provides a lot of information, but as you can see clearly from the homepage, it's a little bit outdated. Maybe 5 years ago it was outdated. So it came time to modernize it, to bring something new. And this is what we came up with. This is the new homepage. You clearly can see the better style. You can see that it's more modern. It's not like cutting edge modern. We still have to be somewhat conservative with the government websites. And I'll talk a little bit about limitations that we had. But still, you can see a lot of new, awesome dynamic elements on this page. Let me shoot back for a second and explain what problems we try to solve with the current website besides just the look and feel. First of all, this website is a mix of static and dynamic content. What that means is that there are multiple places where all these reports are located. Sometimes it's a text file, sometimes it's something in the database. And when you need to change just one thing on the website that goes across all the web pages, for instance, the main menu, you want to add one new item to the main menu, you have to modify hundreds of files sometimes, or sometimes it's just 2 items. And because you need to go to every single text file and you need to modify this main menu. It's hard-coded into each file. So the solution to this problem is called CMS, Content Management System. It's the system which allows you to keep all the information in the database and reuse it in multiple places. Also, this website used very custom code, which means the developers who wrote this code many, many years ago, if they retired or left the project, no longer there is anyone with enough knowledge to support this code. And if there is a bug with this code, well, you'll spend a lot of time fixing it. There are also a couple of things with the standards. For instance, quite some content on this website was not in line with the modern standards of 508 compliance, for instance, because it was written so long ago. And whenever something was created for this website, it was not reusable. So here it is. It's based around Drupal. What Drupal is a system which allows you to keep content in the database and display it in this pretty dynamic, nice form. You probably know about websites like whitehouse.gov, right? So that's another example of Drupal. And clearly, Drupal is one of the best platforms out there, and we used it as the foundation for the new website. One great thing about this website, and it's covered by this term responsive, the very first line, is that this website can be viewed on mobile devices. We know that market is shifting towards smartphones and tablets, and many companies, especially commercial companies, they tend to create multiple websites, one for the smartphone and one for the big guy, for the PC. This website will look perfect on any device, and actually we're coming public really soon. It will be available to everybody, and I encourage you to remember about this session and go visit this website and see how awesome it is.
Can I just jump in here for a second? And what I want to actually for you to take away from these first few slides, it's a very different system that we're going to, the application. It is really modernized. It is using responsive design. It's also allowing us to come into compliance with a HHS regulation, web regulation, 508 compliance, all of the compliance regulations. And so from my perspective, when I was able to view the prototype, it really was put me in a position where I could say, I can see where we're going, and I can see now why the prototype really does reduce our risk and moving forward with this acquisition. Thanks.
Thank you, Missy. So here's the new website. We provided a lot of new modernized elements, including integration with the social networks. And this is something that's just coming to the government websites, but ability to click one button and share this content in the social networks, that's actually a great way to spread the word about the content. And we have this prominently all across the website. On every single page you can share and you can communicate with the social networks. It's very visual. We added a lot of interactive elements, and you'll see a couple of them on the following slides. It's dynamic. We can replace the content on the front page. We don't need to modify any text files. It's just clicking a couple of buttons in the CMS, in the content management system. And on top of that, we managed to make this whole colorful dynamic thing 508 compliant, which is very critical, and it's actually a very, very difficult task. And it also follows all the HHS standards. We carefully reviewed that part. We actually have a couple of teams in HHS that are helping us to verify that everything is compliant with all the requirements. A very important aspect of this website is taxonomy and keywords, and there is a better person to explain how this works and why it's important. It's Joshua Phibbs, my colleague.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm just going to sit here. That's fine. A couple slides. So their original system was based on just basically a flat system of keywords, which made it challenging to be able to organize and to do searches from high to low or from low to high. And one of the other things too is it was, I mean, they had done refinements on it, and they spent a lot of time actually getting it to a point where they were able to use it, but it was still lacking some of the functions of modern technologies and modern standards that we were looking for. So one of the tasks we undertook was to look at the keyword systems that they had, look at all their articles, look at all the reports, and go through and create a taxonomy and a hierarchical taxonomy that gave you a treating structure that it was able to, if you know in Amazon, when you click on the left-hand side, you can start at the top level and drill your way down. Those sorts of functionalities is what we've basically been able to implement using this new taxonomy. The taxonomy also drives a lot of the content aggregation to be able to create new pages. So we can create a landing page, or we can create a theme page based on just these key terms, and then pull that together and create a page. And it can be a permanent page, or it can be a temporary page, but the taxonomy gives a lot of flexibility around that. So that's I guess that slide. So this is an eye test, a chart test here. So I apologize, but the one in the middle is a visualization tool. The center icon is an actual report from ASPE. The article has numerous keywords or taxonomic terms underneath of it, and then you can see below it there's an actual hierarchy that interrelates with it. You can also see, it's hard to see in this visualization, but basically these key terms, then on the right-hand side there's other articles, and there's the relationships of those key terms to other articles. And then something also interesting on the left-hand side, we used a standard called, we used UMLS, the mesh network, or the mesh terminology, which is what National Library of Medicine uses. So if anyone's ever used PubMed or anything of the such, we align that, their taxonomy with that. So what that is on the left there are the 10 most relevant articles from all of PubMed that relate back to that article based on the taxonomy. So again, it gives the ability for flexibility around that. It also gives the ability now that ASPE can send have their content being presented on other sites of people who also use UMLS, the mesh network, the mesh taxonomy or standards, and then also in the future potentially have their site pulling content that is relevant from other areas to also get more stickiness to have people come across. The last thing I'll talk before moving on is basically since all, and again on the right hand side you see the two other articles that are related. Now the site has other related articles. So now instead of just seeing the one report that I came here to look for, I'm here to look at the poverty report for 2015. Oh, there's all these other reports. Let me go take a look at these, and it helps kind of keep the stickiness and allows people to get more information instead of having to kind of poke around. That's actually provided to them using the taxonomy.
What you see in this slide and the next couple slides, we had requirements in the prototype, and one of them was taxonomy. So they actually had to build a small subset of taxonomy so that in the prototype, when we did the search feature, we could actually retrieve the articles that were linked through the taxonomy. And we did this, we had other requirements in the prototype as well, and they're related to the visualizations that you'll see and the data sets that you see that I think Andre is going to show you.
I think it's the next slide. Also, from technology perspective, this ability to cross-link between the websites and within the website, search engines just love it. And this will definitely bring, we believe, this will bring our website to the top of many, many search requests and bring more people to this website and make it more interesting to them. Data. That's actually where we took the radically new approach. It's something pretty new to many, many websites. So I put two tables on the slide. One on the left side, that's the old approach. This is a screenshot from a PDF file from a report, which you can currently download from the website. And it's just a good way to sink in a lot of numbers and try to pull the facts from it, from these numbers. And if you're a researcher looking for a trend, looking for trends, looking for like who is the highest contributor into something, or trying to just understand and grasp on these numbers, it's a very, very difficult to deal with this amount of data if it's just a static table. So what we did is we actually created an automated process which extracts these data nuggets from the reports and puts them into the form, which you can see on the right side. And in this form, you can quickly sort, just one click, and you can sort by any column in this data. It's highly interactive. You can embed it anywhere you want. You can download it and embed it to your presentation, or you can export it into your application. And we actually provide full it's called API, Application Programming Interface. It's basically a way for developers working on something else to pull this data from the live website and build into their application. And you can quickly filter in this table. So the number of possibilities is actually enormous when we extract the data and turn it from picture into data set that can be reused over and over again. And one way to reuse it is to actually visualize this data to make it even more understandable. And on this example, we took the data from the previous page again. Take a look at the left side of the slide, just the numbers. It's not clear what's coming from these numbers, what they actually mean. And the next slide will clearly show you with colors what's going on with the ACA marketplace eligibility in the United States. And you can look at this map. It's highly interactive. You can hide and show different pieces of the map depending on what's going on in each particular state. And you can export this as a PNG file or a JPEG file and put into your reports. So there are a lot of ways to reuse it. And every single data nugget can be, it's called embedded. Some website owner can pull this particular piece of functionality from this website and put on their website, which will bring, we believe, and we know this from our prior experience, this will bring a lot of people to our new website. And this is just great. And to illustrate what's going on here, there is actually this initiative called data.gov, and I believe almost everybody here knew about it. And there is also healthdata.gov, which is HHS specific, and it currently contains around 2,000 data sets, different sets of data that can be reused in various applications. The new OSPI website alone, at this point, it has more than 500 data sets. And this is how much we pulled from these 2,500 static reports which we had on the previous website. And this is just an example of different visualizations that you can grab from the new OSPI website and embed it into your website or reuse in your presentations or use in your research. We took similar approach with the reports. We made them very easily searchable and much more visual, interactive. Before we had reports which contained 150 pages. Well, bad news. Nobody's going to read 150 pages of text and numbers, like just sit and read them. It's not going to work. So what we did is we made this 150-page report interactive. You can see the table of the contents. You click on different headers, and they will expand or collapse. And you can quickly find the necessary chapters in this report in less than 1 second by using a filter, which is embedded on every report. So it makes the whole report information much more accessible. You can also export all the data from these reports, and these data sets, the data nuggets which I mentioned before, they are reused and embedded into each report. So we reusing data over and over again. It's there is this trend is called COPE, C-O-P-E, and it's about creating content once and reusing it in different websites. And actually, if you have something that's related to statistics available on OSPI website, I invite you not to create this visualization, not to create new data sets. Just grab one from OSPI, save you time. At this point, we imported almost all reports from the current OSPI website. As I mentioned before, it's about 2,500 reports, and this site is going live really soon, so you'll be able to see and use all this new functionality.
But before you jump into the Agile process, I just wanted to share with you that from the core perspective, what Andre just demonstrated was really the benefit of writing the statement of objectives instead of a statement of work. the statement of objectives really allowed Akira to come in and to do what they do best and really modernize our website in a way that I could not have really prescribed or detailed in any way. So for us, it really proved to be something really effective to become current with our technology and our web presence.
I would just say from our perspective, it was a refreshing experience. Normally, it's very prescriptive and it's very dictatorial. You must do this, you must do that. In this, and as you can see, we brought technology. We brought technologies that we've used before. We brought, the mesh, which I've used multiple times in my career, and it was an incredibly, refreshing and fun collaborative experience to be able to work together with this. And some things didn't work. We said, okay, we'll just move on to the next one. But it was, an open dialogue to figure out how this was going to happen and what it was going to look like and what was going to come out of it. It's been a really exciting and fun project, honestly.
Oh yeah, it's in my experience, it's the most fun project we had ever with the government. And a big part of this, well, it's not just the process, it's not just the procurement process. It's also the fact that the team we are working with in HHS and MISI in particular, they're giving us a lot of freedom to express good ideas. Of course, it's obviously it's Quark will select what ideas will go to the website, but we were given unbelievable level of this ability to present our great ideas and propose something for the website. So thank you very much. It's really, really great.
Andre, before you sort of continue, and I know I think we're at like maybe 10:35, 10:36, and we want to leave maybe 15 to 20 minutes for questions. We've explained sort of the Agile acquisitions piece, and we've sort of looked at how the website has changed. I think maybe what the audience I may perceive should want would be the next piece is how did you work together between the project management staff at HHS and between Akira? How did you collaborate? How often did you collaborate? What's the benefit? And how is it different than what you previously would experiment with the government? Can you sort of take us there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. This is a very good point and very important point of this whole project, how we collaborated. In the beginning, I just wanted to say a couple of words about Agile and what it is. It's a buzzword. You heard about it, right? Most of you. And it means developing faster and reacting to clients' change requests much, much faster than you typically do with classical processes like Waterfall. It's not just about calling project manager Scrum Master. No, it's not. It's not about having daily meetings and calling them Scrum meetings. It's something much bigger. So what we have is we have this Agile process. It's based on something called Scrum, and Scrum is like 95% of all the Agile processes on the market. And some people think it's the same thing. No, Agile and Scrum are two different things. Scrum is just one version of Agile. There is another version. It's called Kanban. It was invented by Toyota for the car manufacturing, but it's perfect for maintenance and for having quick changes, for handling quick changes from the client. So what we have is we have 2-week sprints. That means we only set our goals for the next 2 weeks, and that's it. We don't know what we'll be doing in 3 weeks, with some addition. Within the sprint, we're trying to avoid any changes. So we plan for 2 weeks, and we're trying to stick with this process as much as possible. Yes, sometimes we are getting quick change requests from MISI, like last Thursday, right? We need this and this done as soon as possible for the Monday presentation. And guess what? Today is done, all of it. And we use this product called Jira. You can research it in the internet. It's one of the best platforms in the web that support this Scrum Agile process. The big challenge here is how to marry this Agile process with the traditional waterfall-like processes in the government. Government is transitioning from waterfall to Agile. It's a long process, and it's a long way. And we had to somehow join these two different processes. And what we did is we created a high-level project plan explaining this is what we'll have in 1 month, this is what we'll have in 2 months. And these are our deadlines and milestones. And then we map this project using so-called Scrum epics to our Agile process, and it worked really well. We were able to work in an Agile manner, and at the same time we were able to provide the timelines and all the necessary artifacts that are traditional for HHS. So that worked really, really good. We have a very dynamic team. We have between 4 and 10 people, depending on the load, depending on what we need to do in each particular stage, in each particular sprint. And we can move people between different projects depending on how much load we have in each project. So we have a big pool of people to bring into the project, and from this pool we borrow right people for the right task. And overall, this approach helps us to quickly implement all the decisions, all the changes from our client, from OSPI. In Agile development, and I'll go quickly through this, another I-test, vision test. So we have all the tests sitting in something called backlog. So whenever somebody comes with whatever is crazy idea it is, we immediately put this idea into backlog. Nothing is lost. Every 2 weeks, we get together on this work group meeting, and we discuss all these new great ideas from the backlog, and we decide what priority to give to each idea. And all the ideas with the highest priorities, they move into the plan for the next 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, the client, OSPI in this case, has the chance to say, this is what's important, and this is what we need in the next 2 weeks. And the rest can wait and be implemented in the next weeks, or maybe not.
I want to just jump in here. It's really critical to understand sort of the 2-week cycle. That is our opportunity for the workgroup team to come together to make decisions, reach out to Akira, ask questions, figure out what the priorities are, what's meeting our goals. We did this routinely. 2 weeks, every 2 weeks would come together and then set the priorities. At the end of that 2 weeks, there were some discrete deliverables that we agreed upon, and that was the critical piece, that we knew that what we would be getting in 2 weeks, and Akira delivered time and time again. There were also adjustments that we made when we would come together and we would make a determination that we wanted to have something changed, or after our quality checking or some other testing that we did, we needed to realign one of our requirements. And again, it took conversations for me through the work group out to a larger group of staff. They would funnel that information back up through the work group, and then again, we would reach out to Akira. So although we were meeting every 2 weeks, I was pretty much in contact with Akira, I'd say just about every day, to make sure that we were tracking to meet all the deliverables that we set forth in the session, the 2-week session, and to make sure that I was in alignment with leadership and the work group and the folks, our strategic partners that we were working with. So I just want to emphasize when Andre talks about sort of this agile methodology where we come together in 2-week cycles, it really is a critical way to steer the ship and to realign it if we need to. And as Andre mentioned, there have been times in those 2-week cycles where we had to do a little change up, and Akira successfully flexed with that and met my requirements at my requests and did it fairly quickly. And I think the takeaway from that is that really you can see the changes. You don't have to wait a long time to see the changes. You can see them within 2 weeks. And I was lucky enough to actually have access not only to the staging server where we would do our quality checking, but also to the production environment. So I could see the changes coming down the path before the end of the 2 weeks. And we also opened up that environment to the work group team so that they could actually get onto the staging server, look at the development cycle, provide the feedback, reach out to Kira directly, and it is a team of about 8 folks. They could reach out to Kira directly, ask questions through email. And we also had a series of Akira on-site visits so that Akira was on site for several days out of every week, that the work group or anybody across the team or our stakeholders could come in, get their questions answered, ask for some changes, and Akira would respond fairly quickly to those. So in real time, you could see what was going on, and you could see your feedback, and you could see the changes right away.
Before Andre picks it back up, and I know we're going to go to questions pretty soon, to give you, even though a lot of you probably know this, Agile versus Waterfall. I like to call Agile sort of keeping the train on the track, Whereas Waterfall, typically you'll ask a contractor to come up with a deliverable and they have 6 months. But in that 6 months, you don't really know what is going on unless they're really, really good and they like to collaborate really often. So if they come back to you in 6 months and they're doing these same kinds of things that Akira and other companies do in 2-week sprints over a 6-month span, you may or may not get the same outcome. You likely won't. But the benefit here is that you can follow along, and if something is veering off the track, you can get it back on the track a lot sooner, and you can minimize any money that is being spent that is not going to get you to your desired outcome.
This also applies to the procurement process. We had this thing that now I consider funny, but back then it was quite stressful. Basically, we were given 15 days for developing this prototype. And then in the beginning of the stage 2, when we actually had to develop this prototype of the website, we were told, hey, now it's 10 days. And we didn't lose time. We panicked immediately. And like 5 minutes later, we realized, hey, it's actually great news. All our competition just lost 5 days for development. So that's what I told to the team, and this actually helped them to cheer up. And we actually use the Agile process. And that means in Agile process, as Missy mentioned before, we have the website completely open to the government. They don't need to look at our monthly reports to understand where we are. They just type in the URL and they see this website immediately. And if they want to fix something, they just send quick email or add the task immediately into Jira, and we will work on this according to the priority. But the thing is, you can wake me up tomorrow in the morning and say, hey, we're going to production right now. And I will not be like, no, we need 2 more months according to this project plan. No, I'll be fine with that. We always know where we are. The website is always ready for production. Well, it will be like in some features. It will have some bugs which are properly documented in Jira. But if the core will decide that we can go to production, we'll be ready for that at any point. And the same thing happened during the procurement. We just worked according to Agile process every day. And when we were told stop, we just stopped immediately. And the website was just there. We worked on this website till the very last minute. And this is all thanks to Agile.
And the 10 days was a really good test of how their teams were structured and how they could respond.
Oh yeah, it was a great test. And I highly recommend everybody to do the same thing. Just cut in half whatever time you're giving to contractors,
I think
just to see how they cope with that.
I think we're ready for questions.
Yeah, we can shift to
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
Don't be shy. We've probably received all the questions many times.
Did your contract handle all the aspects of development, such as the actual development team, the system team, integration team, architecture team? Was it all encompassing?
So you want to repeat the question? In terms of what? Did we involve architecture like with an HHS?
No. Was the contracting company itself who won the award responsible for all aspects of the website, including the development, the architecture, continuous integration, testing?
Yes.
All
Yes.
those different things?
Missy can go into more detail if you'd like on that, but it was pretty. It wasn't completely detailed in terms of what they had to do with it.
That's right.
But it was detailed in the sense that usability testing, integration, migration, maintenance, etc.
Security requirements, HHS web requirements, yeah.
How did you evaluate the 8-page concept paper? Was there some sort of evaluation criteria?
Yeah, there was. So primarily, there were 2 things we were looking for in the 8 pages. We wanted to know what their Agile methodology was. We asked them to illustrate it. We also wanted to know, instead of asking them the typical eval factor of understanding the requirement, here's 8 pages. Explain to us how you can get from A to Z by understanding our requirement, and explain to us how you can do so using Agile. And we felt that in those 8 pages, by them answering those questions, we could really understand if they knew where we wanted to go and how effective they would be in doing so.
So I saw that you mentioned, you mentioned that it's a time and material contract. What cost control measures do you have in place? And so for those 2-week sprints, if at the end of the 2 weeks you don't get what you are looking for or what the deliverable you intended to get, and it's, I don't want to use fault, but fault of the contractors, do we still pay? What kind of cost control measures do you have in place?
Well, thankfully, I haven't had to do that. We do a lot of pre-planning for resources, and we make sure that the resources are properly allocated so that proactively we're not in a position where I have to pull something back. And I probably meet weekly with the budget, Akira's budget person, and he does projections, and we fully projected out the entire cost piece for the project so that we can remain within the limits.
And from our perspective, one of the things is that there's a backlog and there's the priorities that are needed or wanted. We do an internal estimation, and we want to make sure that what we put in will be able to be completed in that time frame. In the worst case scenario, if something, I don't think we had that happen here, but I've had in other projects, if something doesn't happen in that sprint, you communicate it very quickly to your responsible parties, but then it becomes the first thing in your backlog. So at the very beginning of your next sprint, that's one of the first things that gets done. Right, so it's, you kind of flex to make sure that, but I mean, sometimes it happens, but it does not like it falls to the bottom of the list, and you got to wait 6 months to get acquire that piece, then you put it back up to top.
The one other thing I'll add, even though I'm not really involved in this aspect at all, is that when drafting the use case and following up with Akira and with Missy and her project team, is I don't think I've ever seen a contractor and a government program so like entwined. Missy mentioned they basically communicate daily in the 2-week sprints. They have access to the same material. They're a true partner, and I've seen a lot of contracts in my time where you're not really having that true partnership. But they work really, really well together, and if there was ever a perfect example and a perfect experiment to try for the Buyers Club or any group, this is it. I can only hope that every project we do and every other government project that is done to this success. And I think that's because you had Akira that was willing, that knew Agile, and that was ready, and you had Missy's team that was willing to try something different. And I'm sure there's challenges along the way, but they communicate extremely effectively, extremely often, and when they do have a red flag or a challenge that pops up, each of them communicate it, and you're able to move past it so that there's nothing lingering, there's no loose strings, and it's helped them to move very quickly in terms of what they both want to accomplish.
What was the total acquisition time period from requirements to development on the government side to award? And can you talk a little bit about the prototype evaluations? Because my assumption is that requirements were, when you met all the requirements, those were the 5 that you brought into the kind of bake-off. So there was a testing period, or how did you make it not objective when it came to something like a website?
So in terms of getting to the RFP, for instance, we probably started in, I want to say maybe April. We started with a very large document of requirements, and we went through a series of reevaluations until we got to a time where the 3 of us were sort of okay with how things looked. And I think that may have taken, 3 to 4 months. We didn't work constantly together, but it was, here's our review, here's our revision, let's evaluate. Let's say 3 to 4 months, I'm not sure the exact time. The RFP out on the street until award, even though we had 4th quarter implications that we were up against, it took 8 weeks from RFP to award. 12 weeks probably would have been a little more appropriate, but it still worked. And in terms of your follow-up question for the prototype, and I guess how that was evaluated, if I heard that right, we looked at coding, we looked at what the design was like. We had specific evaluation factors. I don't have them in front of me, but they were fair to everyone. And Misty, do you remember any of those eval factors?
We sort of covered some of them in the slide deck. We asked that they take a existing web product, make it searchable, so link it with taxonomy, make it responsive design, the whole website responsive design. We wanted to be sure that they included 508, that they were thinking about that smartly early on in the development cycle. trying to think of what else. I think that's part, we were most interested in taking real web product, doing sophisticated search with the back end of the taxonomy, and then making the report that was a PDF into something that was mobile friendly, that was not a PDF. Was there anything else that you can think of?
We're surprised by your requirement and explanation that you'll be actually reviewing the code. And this is
Yeah.
very important. I highly recommend that you take a look at the code of submission.
And I'll be honest here, and maybe I shouldn't be, but I think in all intents and purposes, we ask for certain things. We don't think they're unreasonable. We paid the $10,000 for the purchase order based on what we thought the average rate was for work over sort of a 2-week time span. We didn't want to ask companies to go above and beyond. The reason why we paid for this group for the purchase orders was we set aside for small business. We also knew this was a different endeavor. And when you do things really differently, sometimes you're not going to get the sort of support or sort of buy-in from in these non-traditional approaches. And this is non-traditional now. We hope it'll become more traditional later. So it was sort of a little carrot out there to participate, and it worked. The thing I was going to say that maybe I shouldn't is we asked for coding, and that's more or less to keep contractors honest. Now this was evaluated, and we did look at the coding, but a lot of times when you ask for things that you may not necessarily need, you may need, it's really up to the program when they're evaluating. These were part of evaluation factors. A lot of groups would rather just do mock-ups. And in terms of, what's appropriate and how far can we go, you have to, if you go in this sort of route, you have to understand that you're not going to get this this blazing, prototype. This is very minimal. It's nothing you can take and move very quickly to, but it gives you an example of the kind of work the company can do in a short amount of time. And it also, it gives us sort of a better opportunity to sort of assess companies. There's something else I was going to say, but I blanked on it. It may come back to me. But it was something different than what we were traditionally doing. It seemed innovative. Companies seemed into it. And I'll say the other thing that's really interesting is, even though we only awarded 5 purchase orders, there was a company that submitted one that did not make it to stage 2 because they really liked the idea and the process and the streamlined way, and they really wanted to show us what they could do, even though they had no chance of getting an award. It just goes to show you that people like to show their capabilities as opposed to drafting material on paper that you just have to read through.
And I would also add that we actually leveraged the prototype. So when Akira came to the kickoff meeting and the project planning, they had an accelerated delivery schedule. So for me, that was a win-win. We could actually use that work right away.
Thanks, Missy, for reminding that piece, is that if you do something like this, and I tell anyone who does something like this, is if you're going to give them a homework assignment per se, it needs to be something that you can use in the remainder of your acquisition. So if you're going to pay 10 grand or even not pay 10 grand, if you're going to ask a company to do work, that work should then be able to move over into the actual development of your acquisition. It should benefit you and it should benefit the contractor.
Yeah, I would just
Make
say-
it real.
And it was amazing to go to the kickoff meeting and have a prototype working, and having the people around the work group table go, wow, okay, great. And they would say, we don't like that, or we like that. I mean, right at the outset, where you normally get in, you start working with people, figuring out what they want. Time can go by. This was like coming out of the first meeting, we were already building our backlog. It was really great.
Yeah, American Fair pretty much just, he left the gate. By the time he got to the finish line and we awarded it, he was ready to go. Other questions?
Good morning. I know you talked about the small business set aside. What other market research or contract vehicles did you guys look at, like GSA Schedule, or maybe that's not how this went down? But
So,
just-
I think that, you can use any mechanism you want. I was more interested in the kind of method you could use. Again, this is probably, some things I should and shouldn't say, but because a lot of Agile is so new, and a lot of the schedules, a lot of the federal strategic sourcing initiatives and these NASA SOUP, NITAC that are out there, they're all great vehicles, and GSA's 18F is coming out with an Agile Services BPA. What we knew coming into this was that we really wanted a company that knew Agile, and if we went with one of these vehicles that existed, there would have been a tremendous amount of research for us to do to ensure that they knew Agile. So for this one particular, our first go at, we wanted to put on the open market and to attract as many companies as we could and vet them based on Agile in that concept paper. And we thought, or I thought, this is me, I thought that it might be in our best interest to go open market and see what could come our way. That's not to say we will not use, or groups can't use NITAC or GSA Schedule 70. You definitely can. But like GSA is doing at 18F with the Agile Services BPA, they're vetting contractors at the very beginning to determine whether they're Agile or not. And the whole point is that if you go and you want to use that BPA or that schedule or whatever that IDIQ is, you know offhand they've been vetted, they're approved. Again, you're mitigating any failure risk. You're getting away from waterfall.
Yeah, I just have a question in reference to early planning. How did you get your acquisition shop to agree to this strategy? And do you think they'll do this again?
I know Mark and I are already working on some other procurements to try to, I guess, refine this strategy and try out some different things. I think the way the project came to me, and Mark touched on this, my HCA came to me and mentioned that the Buyers Club was looking to try out some things that are characterized as innovative. In my mind, they're things that have been done before in some fashion that for any number of reasons the government generally doesn't seem to be doing anymore, and was looking for someone that had a more liberal and open-minded attitude. So I guess I sort of got selected to handle this, and so my posture from the get-go was to take seriously trying to be very liberal. And sort of follow the general FAR guidance that if it's not explicitly in violation of law, regulation, or executive order, you're to assume it's a permissible practice. And then I just did my legwork with GAO cases, bid protest decisions with respect to two-stage down selects, et cetera. But a lot of it was just, I guess, making sure the acquisition team had the right people on it. I do a lot of reading. On WIFCon and some other acquisition-specific forums. And the thing that excited me about this is you see a lot of folks discussing how federal procurement is basically a proposal writing game, and who can write the best proposal as opposed to doing a more thoughtful procurement. So I was excited by the notion of trying to find something where we could do some things that intuitively just struck me as making a heck of a lot more sense.
And I'm just going to add, from a core perspective, these guys really did handhold me through this entire process. We were connected throughout the writing, throughout the whole acquisition. Clint's been very modest about his involvement, but certainly he was in almost daily contact with me through certain parts of that acquisition process, and Mark as well, and I just felt really supported that I could actually step out and do this kind of acquisition.
And I think my last comment here would be, typically procurement can be viewed as a barrier. Procurement, I would like to get involved in processes with program at the exception of the need, but because of that perceived barrier, they're not necessarily invited in. And you have this vice versa and this, more sometimes combative mentality that they can't really help each other or work well together. But what we found, and I found since then, is that if you can get the subject matter experts in the room, develop that integrated project team, develop these collaborators. If you get folks in the room at the beginning, before you start progressing down, developing any requirements, people tend to brainstorm together and come up with ideas. Everyone wants to be helpful. It's just that they're so entwined in their swim lanes. They stay in their swim lanes until you get them out and you get them to collaborate with one another based on their different needs. And procurement has needs, program has needs, security has needs, 508 has needs. Until you get all those groups in the room together at the earliest possible process, and then you take the remainder of that journey together, you're going to end up with a much better outcome. You're also going to minimize any risks, and you're going to increase your success factor exponentially. I think that may take us to our time.
We are at time. If you have a completed survey, you can bring it to the front, and if you had any closing remarks up front, please go ahead.
All right.
And we have a 15-minute break, so enjoy that.
I'm gonna just-